it's their house, it's a big problem. And it's something that they need to be able to take care of in the right sort of way.
Yeah, it's a
The
good.
first responders also need to be able to take care of their families and themselves to be able to have the time to go and be first responders. So that's another part of the equation that we didn't address tonight, but it's one of the important pieces. With Katrina, they learned where they had hundreds and hundreds of buses, school buses, staged to evacuate people, but all the people that were driving the buses were evacuated. This is the kind of thing that common sense doesn't take care of, but you need to be trained and have a plan for it.
Yeah, be respectful, Lance. You're if you're deploying down to a disaster, people are traumatized, they're upset, they've lost personal belongings, their businesses, the buildings, both home and commercial, have been damaged. Be respectful. Be a good listener. But more importantly, when you go back to the emergency operations center and they're telling you to go faster, that's not always possible. And there's times where I've been leading teams, I'm going, stop. That's going to make this whole situation, which is already unsafe, and it's going to increase the risk for injury and damage. We have to slow down. That's not safe to go in there. That building has been closed. The windows have been closed. The door has been closed. There's sandbags at the front. It got flooded. It's been a week to 10 days before anyone's opened that. And you want me to go in there and do what? And if they don't have the proper personal protective equipment, the gear, the safety gear, you can't rush into those buildings. And that's so important. Again, have good decision makers, good management, good leadership, and then you've used that word common sense. I try not to use that in a disaster situation. I try to focus on the hazards. I try to risk, and I say, what's the worst that can happen? And I start that with all my conversations, because people they rush. When they go fast, they get hurt.
There's a very good comment here that I want to put out to both of you and whoever wants to jump in on. There's a few things here. As a follow-up, community members are asking us directly, what do we do? What cleaner should we use? If not bleach, what? We're already getting those questions from our community members.
So I think there's a couple of links that he identifies this. That's Ryan. A couple of links I put into the chat area, one for volunteers and one for residents, and that's in our Normie Pro ETF. But we also have a great section of our normie.org webpage on the very bottom, resources for the do-it-yourselfer. And I think that's a really, really powerful little paragraph. It's got several links in there. I was just looking at it again. I know we have a resource library that will help them with getting information that they need, accurate information. There's information there about enzyme cleaners. I also have my book there, Mold-Free Construction. So I think there are a lot of resources at the bottom of normie.org that would really help give you the tools that you need. And I'll tell you, Ryan, if I were there, I'm in Louisiana right now, but if I were there, I would take those flyers and I would be printing a bunch of them out and probably handing them out to everybody I know walking up and down the street. That you talk about how you could help. I think that would be phenomenal, is just getting that information out.
Just try to pay attention to the addresses that we're giving you. The chat may not be available if you go back to watch this as a replay. It's normie.org is one of them. And the other one that we gave out a few times was normieproetf.org. And from there, you can access a lot of information. Gavin, I'm not sure if you had another site you wanted to give out.
No, I totally agree with Doug. Let's again the challenge we have, and I think we've correctly and we've been good citizens on this webinar by showing the U.S. government, at the federal government level, which also then translates to what's at state government, local government, as well as those other wonderful organizations that respond. The information at the moment is misleading. In some situations, it's completely wrong. In some situations, there's not enough detail to be able to do a job that keep you safe. So really important. If we get too many mixed messages, as we're seeing right now, and we've talked about in this webinar, it leads to unsafe, or it leads to actions that aren't based on science and evidence, and that leads to mistakes. So it's really important that these events aren't going to go away, Lance. This is just, we've had 2 hurricanes, both made landfall, cause significant hardship, significant damage, significant problems. And we're seeing from our wonderful ISSA members and Normie members on the ground right now, real reports that things are not being done the best that they can do, and there are ways to do this better.
Doug, any last comments here?
I don't think so, except that I just want to really thank again Dr. Gavin for being here. A great asset. He's been a big help to us, and just thank you so much to him and ISSA. This has been a great collaboration and a good partnership. I'm looking forward to the great things that we're going to be able to accomplish together.
Yeah, it is important, Doug. I'm glad we met all those years ago. I'm glad that but more importantly, we're doing this as it's a team. It's a true collaboration through our Normie ISSA Alliance, and there's room for many, many more partners.
Thank you both for taking the time to be here. We appreciate it. And everybody else that's watching, thank you. And I'm sure there'll be more information coming out in the near future. And please be safe, whatever your involvement is with this disaster. Thank you.
It's another innovative product from Best Living Systems, recognized as a world-class manufacturer of air purification devices. The trademarked MCI Synergy Pure Probe. Designed so that you can configure the probe to fit your specific needs, whether residential or commercial applications, the Synergy Pure by Best Living Systems is simply the most advanced HVAC probe on the market today. Customizable 1 to 3 tons, 3 to 5 tons, 5 to 10 tons, you decide. The MCI Synergy Pure 16K is the basic unit designed to be installed in the return plenum to keep the internal parts clean. Add the bracket and a single ionizing DBI cell and increase the cleaning power on the supply side of the air handler. With the addition of a second ionizing DBI cell, the Synergy Pure becomes a powerful commercial probe. At the heart of the unit is the multifaceted quad metallic honeycomb, which serves as the target plate for the 3-year germicidal wavelength UV lamp. Instead of relying on only TiO2 and heavy ozone, this PCO process is safer and provides more cleaning power without ozone. The patented dielectric barrier ionization DBI cell is especially designed for volatile organic compounds, VOCs, and effectively increases the technology in the airflow downstream from the air handler. By adding a second cell, the cleaning power is increased yet again as the unit becomes supercharged. When the unit is on, an indicator light illuminates on the face of the ballast, so the probe is easy to maintain. Designed with precision and the latest components, this unit provides years of uninterrupted service. The Synergy Pure stands as a giant among air purifiers because of its powerful approach to proactive air purification. Installed inside the duct system, these products send the cleansing power of MCI, multi-cluster ionization, down the airstream and into the living environment. Recognized by national organizations like ASHRAE, lethal to microbes, but totally safe for humans. This technology has proven its effectiveness over and over again in hospitals, homes, and offices. Clinical and field tests have proven it so. Synergy Pure reduces contaminants and allergens in the air and on surfaces. Mold and mildew oxidized and eradicated. Bacteria and viruses destroyed by this surface cleaning technology. TVOCs and MVOCs reduced or totally eliminated, and odors and dust gone. Simply gone. It really works every time. Best Living Systems, featuring the MCI surface cleaning technology to purify air and surfaces, protect the living space, and prevent spreading the germs. For more information, visit our website or just make the call. Best Living Systems, for people who like to breathe.
I want to welcome Dr. Gavin McGregor Skinner from GBAC to join us today. And I'm just saying GBAC, but that's just a tiny piece of what you actually do. So could you say hello and kind of let us know who you really are?
Yeah, that's a good question, Lance. I'm not sure whether I do work for a living or I just follow a lot of great hobbies. I think what really makes everything worthwhile from my professional opinion is the people I work with. So I'm very fortunate within the entire cleaning industry. I just work with wonderful people, whether it be cleaning on the front lines of a commercial building, a school, an airport, a hotel, or working with remediators, restorers, whether we're dealing with mold or we're trying to focus on the science of drying, for example. So it's just a fascinating industry. I don't know how you're doing, Lance, but at the moment I'm flat out. It's really busy.
It has been, and it's kind of increasing at an exponential rate. It's really strange that there's been so many weather events so far this year that have affected so much of just the U.S. alone that we are extremely busy. Not complaining, but it's just like you said, flat out, I think is the term you used.
Yes, it is. It's been really interesting, Lance. We've seen on the news, all the focus on tornadoes, and we've seen an enormous number, an exceptional number of tornadoes in the last few months. But what we don't realize, Lance, is that where there's a tornado, there's a much larger severe thunderstorm. There's a rain event, there's a wind event. And so while we focus on the very critical needs of focusing on the impact of a tornado and the disaster and the catastrophic damage it can do, we start to forget that there's many other communities suffering from unusual rainfall, severe thunderstorms. I don't know what your night was last night, but we had power outages here in Washington, D.C. And that's really where the industry is looking at right now. There's so many opportunities for us based on these weather events.
Well, every year in May, Normie does a training for its members on hurricanes. Hurricane season starts June 1st. So we try to put it in everybody's mind again. This is what's coming, be prepared, stock up, all that stuff. And we do that. And sometimes you get the reaction where it's almost like people become blasé about the whole hurricane effect until it's going to happen. It's kind of like every year you see people that live in hurricane-prone areas lined up for 6 hours to buy plywood. Well, if you live there, why wouldn't you have plywood, or supplies you need? So this is the kind of thing that people don't really take seriously until it's going to affect them. And to your point, it doesn't have to be a hurricane or a major cyclone event. I mean, just from a severe thunderstorm, golf-sized or baseball-sized hail will puncture roofs, causing lots of water damage. So there's a lot of other effects that really happen from these major storms, which, as we know in the last month or two, from Texas all the way up to the Midwest, up to the East Coast, has been heavily affected by severe weather, and not from tropical weather systems.
No, you're absolutely right, Lance. And that preparedness that you just sort of outlined is opportunities for all of our colleagues in the cleaning industry. I'm seeing some great examples, especially this year. I do a lot of disaster preparedness, emergency management preparedness work, as well as response and recovery. But during that preparedness phase, as you really correctly outlined here, I've seen some really good examples, but they haven't gone to scale, and it's not enough, where actual cleaning professionals have been part of the planning process. But it's happening at a much smaller level than I think it should happen at, and at both at the state level, the local county level, the city level. We've got to be more involved as an industry in that preparedness planning process. As we saw, over the last couple of weeks, Lance, with those storms in Texas, the Midwest, and now we're seeing some stuff on the East Coast as well. When that piece of hail goes through your roof and it lets all the water in, or the rain is so torrential that you've got flooding, or you've had wind damage that's opened up half your house and you've got more water damage, where do you go? Where is it? Is it a Google search? Hopefully that's not what it is, but that I know that's what's happening. But more importantly, how do we position ourselves in the cleaning industry to be part of preparedness so that we're on the list, so that when the damage has happened, when the disaster has occurred, they just go down the list and go, here are all the cleaning professionals that have followed, say, an IRCRC standard. They're certified. They've done the normie training. They're certified for that as well. And that we know that they have the skills, the knowledge, and the abilities to, again, do what is professional.
Well, let's get into that in a minute, but let's set the stage here, because you and I were talking a few days ago, and you had mentioned Colorado State University, I believe it is the name, and I actually have a graphic here I'm going to bring up on the screen in a minute. And this is talking about weather modeling and forecasts and predictions for upcoming seasons. And we basically talked, and you said, and I looked in, and you were correct. It looks like it is the worst forecast ever on record that they're predicting for this season. So let me bring it up on the screen. I don't know if you want to just talk about this real quick, or mention a few things to people, but you can also explain about the modeling, because most people use either the US versions or the European models. And this is, to me, it looks like a hybrid. So let me just share my screen here for a sec. You should be able to see my screen now.
Yes, I can, Lance.
Yeah, I mean, this is what Colorado State University is forecasting with their whole atmospheric prediction center, and the numbers are staggering.
Yeah, it is. So hurricane season is real. It happens every year. It's no one takes bets on it, Lance, because it's just going to happen. We know that. But when it comes to modeling, and this is where we need to appreciate how that science of modeling has advanced so much. And again, it won't be 100% accurate, but it's going to be pretty damn good, in the fact that we've now got science, we've got so much data available to us, as well as the mathematicians, the university professors, the scientific experts that then can use massive amounts of data now in their algorithms, in their systems, to come up with a forecast like this. So really, we see a forecast from the government come out, oh yeah, that's the government. But when you see it from an independent body like the University of Colorado, which actually matches exactly what the government did forecast as well. But when they look at that, there's the opportunity for all of us in the clean industry.
Well, you're absolutely right. And I think it's the preparedness side of it and the triage side, which we can talk about in a minute, because, what do you do when you come into a disaster area? I mean, they're talking on here, the predictions for 2024 are almost double the average for the last 30 years.
Well, it
in
is
every category.
When you look at named storm days, so don't just look at the storms themselves, the number of storms and how long that, remember Hurricane Katrina and how long that hung around, and remember the flooding and the disaster we had in Houston. That storm lasted for many days, not just hours. So we've got on this graph, on this table here, Lance, we've got the number of the named storms is higher than normal, but look at the named storm days. That's 115 in a season that runs from June to November. And that is double the average.
Yeah,
And
it's pretty staggering looking at that. I mean, they talk about the energy of the storms, 210 compared to 123 over a season compared to 30 years of data. It's amazing the numbers they're looking at for this year.
so how do we define a hurricane? It's a rain event, it's a wind event. We're going to get damage to buildings. We're going to get water penetration. We're going to have drying issues. We're going to we know everything happens. Location is so important here. We know that those hurricanes will hit areas of high temperature, high humidity. We know what that leads to. Again, the possibility of increased growth of microorganisms, germs, and especially mold. So again, that science of drying is so important that it's done properly and appropriately. And again, we can now pre-position ourselves. This is what's so critical. I've seen so many examples from our colleagues in the industry going, I'm now moving from, and I'm giving you an example here. I'm moving from Virginia or North Carolina, and I'm going to put some of my workers, my assets, my business in Alabama, in Texas, in Florida. Why? Because they saw that forecast. And it's so important, Lance, that as we see that level of preparedness from some of our colleagues, that we try to expand that to many of our colleagues, because a forecast like that is going to show that there's going to be a real need for the science, the evidence, but more importantly, to ensure that those people that do respond are certified. And again, so, those southern states, they're going to get hit, possibly the East Coast. We've seen those storms come up the East Coast like Sandy did, Tropical Storm Sandy did, 2011 or thereabouts, when it hit New Jersey, where you live, as well as when it went into, left hook into New York, the damage it caused. It was the water damage. And if there's a group of professionals that have the knowledge, the skills, abilities, and the expertise in drying, it's us. And that's something that we need to do better in our advocacy, our awareness, our marketing, to ensure that the emergency managers know that we exist and who we are and who's credible and who's reliable.
You're absolutely correct. And, it's thinking of the issues that develop that aren't, I guess, the common themes that people think about, like you just mentioned, the water, the wind, things like that. Well, if you're sending a crew into this area, there may not be power. What are they going to do? There's only so much you can't dry. There's no power for it, so you need generators. Well, there may not be fuel. You may have to bring that with you. I mean, all of these things just keep getting larger and larger as you're trying to prepare for it. Are your crews prepared for the weather conditions they're going to be in? I just saw last night they're predicting for Southern California and parts of Las Vegas, Nevada area, 111 plus degrees in the shade for the next few days. We're not at summer yet. We're 2 weeks away. And, how do you send a crew into work in an environment like that? And yes, it's the desert, but you can have flood damage. You can still have problems there.
Yeah, this is interesting, Lance. In the work that I used to do in like biological weapons, I used to respond to Ebola outbreaks in West Africa. You're in a hot, humid environment, and you're required to wear personal protective equipment. Actually, not required, you have to wear. You get Ebola, that's a death sentence. It's this is a disease that doesn't have a cure. So let's look at this now. We know where the hurricanes are going to most likely hit. We know those states, those locations. Yes, they're hot and humid. We know that our essential frontline industry workers are going to have to wear personal protective equipment. You can't clean these up in t-shirt and shorts. So how do we then train? How do we move quickly to ensure that they can work safely, they can work efficiently, and they can wear the personal protective equipment that's required in what I would really, these are hostile environments. And after a storm, it becomes even more hostile. And, so hostile, austere, whatever sort of terms you want to use, these are tough environments that I think we really have to go into that that rapid training process right now of going, okay, guys, this is going to happen. We just saw the forecast. Lance just showed it. We've all seen it. We've heard about it. And we don't just wait now. We go into training mode. And how do we train people to wear personal protective equipment, to clean and dry and remediate, restore the way that is based on science, but to do it in a way that's safe for them, which is really, really important, so they continue and work the next day after that. And that's a critical need right now. It's going to be a tough summer. There's no doubt about it.
Well, it's also training on how to approach this disaster area. If you're sending a crew in, what do? You run to the worst looking spot, you run to what you can manage. Are you going to be tied up for weeks on one job? You need to manage all of that stuff against your resources and what you're going to have down the road available to you. It's like triaging a terrible accident scene. You need to know where to put your resources.
That's a really interesting point, Lance. Relationships matter.
Yeah.
And the point is that I just spoke to some colleagues, some good friends down in Texas. They've had some big storms. They've lost power. And even though they're in the industry, they're on a Google search looking for a remediator, a restorer, a mold assessor. They're using Google. Why haven't we done better in creating those lists and sharing those lists with the key emergency management personnel, both at state and local level, the mayor's office, for example, the commerce of chambers, the business development community, so that people know that when that happens, and we know it's going to happen, the forecast is not just make-believe, it's based on a lot of information with good algorithms. So we are going to get hurricanes this season. That's going to happen, just like we did last year and the year before. But more importantly, be better prepared as an industry to say, here's the list. Here's the list of people that have been, that follow the IRCRC standards. They're certified. They've done the training through NORMI. They've got the necessary skills and abilities. You don't rely on Google to fix these really critical problems that we're going to see based on water and wind damage.
You say water and wind damage. I just want to mention something, and I've seen this over and over with not hurricane-sized stuff, at least by me, but with other types of major storms. People throughout the country have a perception of it's a Cat 1, Cat 2, Cat 3, Cat 4 hurricane. Well, that's a number. That's all that really is, and it's really looking at the general wind strength. But you get a Cat 1 storm up here on the East Coast from where you are in DC up through Maine. That is devastating compared to a Cat 3 down in Florida, Louisiana, where they don't have 200- and 300-year-old trees, that are, 200 and something feet in the air that are all going to come down and take out your power grids, or New York City with subways. It's all underground. It's below sea level. This is shutting down mass transit. I mean, and for those of you not familiar with New York City, you don't just get in your car and drive someplace in New York City. You crawl in traffic when everything is working. So when you lose your tunnels, your bridges, and things like that, everything shuts down. So planning for that stuff, to your point, staging things is really the only way to really deal with this.
It is, Lance, and I've been, involved in emergency management and responding to disasters for many years. And when you actually go and meet the people in that location that have just experienced a tornado or the hurricane, the first thing they say to me is, we'll never do this again. It shouldn't take a real world example to change people's behavior going, no, next time I'm going to evacuate, or next time I'm going to be better prepared. That's not how life should work. And so it's really important right now. The question that I threw out to a group the other day when they were going to respond to some tornado damage and some big severe thunderstorms was, which car park are you going to? Where are you going to meet the mayor's office? Where are you going to meet the emergency managers? Where are you going to meet the people that are coordinating the response and recovery efforts? In what car park are you going to meet them in, so you can then be part of a coordinated professional approach? And no one knew this. They're going to drive into town and start making random phone calls or knocking on doors in the middle of a disaster. No, you've got to do better than that. And so part of our preparedness is to go, okay, if this hurricane hits New Orleans or Mobile, Alabama, or if it hits Galveston or if it hits Miami, Florida, this is where you go to meet, where the emergency manager will be to coordinate the response, which is not just hours and days, it's weeks and months.
Well, the utility companies do that all the time. You see when they are expecting these high wind events, especially, they're moving resources from all over the country and staging them north, south, east, and west of where they're expecting problems. They can't put them in the area because then they become part of the problem, but at least they're staged to respond in.
That's a great analogy, Lance. We often see photos in the media of the utility companies, especially the power companies, all lining up, meeting outside of the disaster area, getting ready to go in, because electricity power loss is so critical for so many people that we have to restore it as quickly as possible. Something similar like that might help our industry. We may not have to go in the day of or the day after the disaster, but we need to be there pretty soon after. And so where is that staging area? How do we become part of the community is really a good conversation to be having right now.
There's different stages, as you're aware of, when you have these types of disasters. And the first one is rescue. That's what you're dealing with first. Rescue, you're trying to save lives. Property takes, second seat, or third, depending on what you're dealing with. But that process could take several days. Going in there because you want to go start drying out somebody's house, you're in the way of rescue efforts. So you don't want to be part of the problem either. When it switches over to, recovery, it's still not quite at that repair stage. Recovery is now salvaging what can be salvaged. And then you get into the repair and the build back and, restoring lives. But that's got to be coordinated. And you can't just go rushing in because you become part of the problem. We kid about it, but we say when you go to these types of storms, you don't want to fall into one of those two categories as a victim or survivor. Neither one is really where you want to be.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Lance. But a lot of the work that I'm involved in is under the umbrella of critical infrastructure protection. So it may not be going into a residential house or home to help. It's maybe the stadium that was acting as the evacuation center, or the school that needs to be up and running, or it may be a commercial building, or the airport that's been damaged, or the hotels or the convention center. So it's really, again, based on your risk assessment, based on your damage assessment, what are those buildings that fall under, say, critical infrastructure protection and needs, those buildings that we need for society, for the community to function, that have been damaged, that at least our industry can go in and help with immediately. So I understand the cleaning of the houses, the drying the houses, that could come later, but the critical infrastructure stuff has to be done really soon after the disaster.
One of the things that we found when Hurricane Sandy came through the New Jersey Northeast area was there was a lot of publicity about all the gas stations. They're ready to go. They're fueled up. There's plenty of gas. Nobody had power. There was no requirement for the gas stations to have generators. So they had full tanks of gas. Nobody could pump them. And that became an issue which caused new ordinances to go into effect, forcing gas stations to put in generator systems to be able to pump gas. Because they could get the fuel, they just couldn't give it to anybody. Same kind of thing. If you're going into these areas, you need to make sure you can get resources.
Yeah, that's exactly, that's so true. One of the things that I saw in Florida, I went down to after Hurricane Ian. It was hot, it was humid. There was a lot of people removing debris in shorts and t-shirts. I saw a number of skin infections, and that seawater had come in. That's the surge was pretty spectacular, and that brings in a lot of different germs, microbes, fungi. So we saw some pretty nasty skin infections because it was either, people hadn't been trained on how to wear personal protective equipment, didn't know where to get it, didn't have it. The idea of going into buildings that have been closed for days and even weeks in a hot, moist, humid environment and opening the door without any eye, nose, mouth protection.
Yep.
And when it was like I was in one area where had a team, and I went, and they were gung ho, ready to work. They were working really hard, and they were about to go into a building. Went, stop! This building's been closed, guys, for nearly 3 weeks. It's hot. It's wet. What's in there, I don't know, but we aren't protected to go in there. But that took a little bit of a discussion and conversation to look at the risks and the hazards we're about to face. Slow things down a little bit until we got the right protective equipment. So those staging areas are important. Having the knowledge and the knowledge and the abilities to understand what protects you, or what can, first of all, what can hurt you, and then what's needed to protect you, is all part of our training. So it might be probably something that you've covered in your normie sort of hurricane preparedness courses, Lance.
Well, we do talk about that, and we actually have a website up for the public, hurricane.normie.org. It's there. It's always available for people to watch. We also have flood.normie.org. And, they cover a lot of the major issues. But from the cleaning industry, which is more specifically to what you do, I want to say general, instructions, but more of a recommendation for what people should do as business owners and homeowners. The two different things there. What should they do from the cleaning side?
Right now, and this is something that I think both Normie and we can help at ISSA, is make those connections. Again, if you've been certified, you've got the proper training, knowledge, abilities. You follow the standards like the IRCRC standards. You follow the training like Normie provides or ISSA provides. If we know that you're trained and what you do is professional, then we're more than willing to help make those connections at the local emergency management agency level, the mayor's office, as well as the emergency management agency, to start creating those that awareness that's lacking at the moment. As I said, I've seen some great examples where I was doing exercises, tabletops and drills in the last couple of months, and there were cleaning professionals at those exercises. That's really unusual for me. They usually don't turn up. They're not invited. And I'm starting to see them become invited, Lance. And that then leads to that when the tornado hits, severe thunderstorm, or the hurricane hits, at least those decision makers in the community have a list of trained, professional, credible cleaning industry professionals. And that's what we can do right now. It's June. There's no storms, no hurricanes on the horizon just yet, which is a good thing. So now is time to make those relationships, share your credentials, your expertise, and get on the list so that when that disaster happens, they come to you for the business.
Absolutely. And we have our Normie Pro site where people can locate Normie members throughout the country. But I want to just mention something to the general public that, would be seeing what we're talking about now. Quite often when these major disasters happen, especially in the states that have licensing regulations and things for people that are allowed to do this type of recovery work, sometimes they get overwhelmed in these states and they suspend the licensing laws and they let any contractors come in and do this kind of work. Then it becomes the responsibility of the homeowner, the business owner, to make sure these people are trained. To your point, who are you trained by? Then go Google them, make sure it's a reputable organization, because anybody with a pickup truck and a bucket doesn't become a cleaner and a remediator overnight. There's training, there's experience, there's working, kind of in a learning process that you must go through to know how to handle this stuff and safely.
And that's what's so critical, Lance. Drying a building is based on scientific principles. There's so many different surfaces, substances, materials in that building that you have to use science to dry them properly and safely so that people can go back and live in them safely and healthy and be healthy. Mold remediation is based on scientific principles. Again, so as you correctly said, we have seen in the past relaxation of the licensing requirements because there's a need for a surge. That's not good for the industry. That's not good for science. It's not good for what we do, and it doesn't guarantee that what you're doing works, doesn't guarantee it's effective, and it doesn't guarantee that that building is safe for when the people start using it again. And that's our job. Our job is to guarantee safety. And so that's why, you go through the certification programs, you go through the training, you go through continuous education to ensure that what you do works and creates a safe indoor space. It worries me. It really worries me when I see relaxation of anything in the middle of a disaster for a matter of convenience, and that then leads to problems.
Well, absolutely. And part of that problem is when a government entity issues an executive order or a bill is put through that changes the status quo, even if it's a short-term thing, people don't normally read the full impact or read into the full impact of what the bill says. I know with Texas, there was an issue where they suspended licensing laws. I think it was in the Houston area last time because of the massive flooding. They had like 40 inches of rain or something like that. But part of the executive order that was put out said that before the project could be finished, even if you weren't licensed to do the job, a licensed assessor had to clear it and guarantee there'd be no mold. But people weren't reading that far into it. They just said, oh, we don't need a license, let's go do the work. And people were getting in trouble with that.
Yeah, and I think what you've highlighted, though, Lance, is critical. That the list that Normie holds is important. The list that ISSA have of our members, we know what training they've done. We know what they do. We know their capabilities. So it's really important that right now we work together to help our members be part of the team, be part of the disaster response and recovery teams. I think that's, for me, having been in the emergency management, disaster response industry for a number of years now, that's the biggest opportunity before the hurricanes hit right now, is if you're not part of it, then become part of it. If you need help in becoming part of it, reach out to us.
Absolutely. Call us. We're here to help, whether, you're more focused on the cleaning side or on the remediation or assessment side. And truthfully, they complement each other. So it's not really different sides. It's just different pieces of the same, solution. And I think the word you used before, team, really sums it up.
Yeah, and again, there's so many of our members that have got themselves organised. They're good case studies for us to look at. They're good examples for us to spread the word that this is how certain companies within our industry have got themselves organised to be part of that team, the disaster emergency management response team. But again, what I'm seeing, Lance, in the real world, there's so many more gaps and so many more opportunities to fill.
Absolutely. Well, I know we had started off talking earlier about, the alligators or crocodiles snapping at our heels here. We got so much going on. So I'm going to really thank you for taking your time out of what you've been doing to do this interview. There's a lot of information here that people need to hear over and over. Not you hear it once and I'm good for 10 years. You need to stay on top of this, hear things over, and 2 years from now, oh, that's right, I do remember hearing that. And that's the whole reason for training and for being prepared and staging and working as a team, because somebody else may remember what you forgot.
No, you're absolutely right, Lance. And if a company, an organization, if someone has had success in being part of that emergency management team in the response to disasters, share that information with us. We'd be more than happy to tell that story to others and spread the word.
Absolutely. Gavin, I appreciate the time, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Lance. That was fun. Have a good day.
You too.
Best Living Systems introduces MCI, Multi-Cluster Ionization, the most innovative and cost-effective air purification technology on the market today. The trademarked MCI, Multi-Cluster Ionization, was first introduced at the 2014 ASHRAE show, where it was recognized by industry experts with an honorable mention as an innovative technology. How does it work? Utilizing multiple components in a synergistic way produces a clustered bipolar ion capable of annihilating microbes in the air and on surfaces. IAQ professionals are very familiar with the UVC germicidal wavelength, as it is combined with a multi-metallic, multifaceted hydrophilic target plate to proactively produce an increased number of hydroxyls throughout the airstream. This well-documented PCO process is then enhanced with a unique dielectric ionizer to produce the powerful MCI clustered ion, completely safe for humans but lethal to microorganisms of all kinds. Airborne contaminants like microscopic dust particles, mold spores, dead skin, pollen, and other allergens are attracted to but then destroyed by the power of the clustered ion. Testing data has shown a significant reduction in all airborne contaminants, including VOCs, biologicals, odors, and particulates. Contact transmission and contamination on the surfaces we touch can now be controlled with the implementation of the trademarked MCI technology. Pathogens on surfaces get zapped with the highly charged clustered ion. The benefit of surfaces being sanitized with MCI is long-lasting and actually creates an environment where contaminants being transferred to that surface are immediately destroyed, leaving the surfaces constantly cleaned and sanitized. The trademarked MCI multi-cluster ionization technology is incorporated in an array of air purification products offered by Best Living Systems, including HVAC probes for plenums and plug-and-play standalones for large or small areas. MCI, for people who like to breathe.
The Clean Air Kiosk now introduces the incredible Pure Synergy. Utilizing the trademarked MCI multi-cluster ionization surface cleaning technology, this powerful unit cleanses the air and surfaces while running 24/7. From a central location in your home, the Pure Synergy proactively cleans a volume of air up to 22,000 cubic feet. That's over 2,500 square feet in the average home, and eliminates the dust that feeds dust mites and other pests. And since clean air is the absence of any contaminants, your entire home, apartment, or office will feel crisp and clean, just like the way it feels at the beach or in the mountains. Some rooms in our homes have specific issues that will be addressed by the Pure Synergy. Odors associated with diaper pails, carpeting, or pets are often difficult to remove, but this unit does the trick. And as a bonus, the proactive MCI technology keeps the surfaces of toys cleaner, reducing bacteria that may be left over after being handled by multiple children. Field and laboratory testing data has shown without doubt that surfaces contaminated with bacteria and other microbes can be kept cleaner with the Pure Synergy. The MCI surface cleaning technology goes to the source of the problem and destroys E. coli, Salmonella, MRSA, and many other surface-borne contaminants, keeping food contact surfaces safe for you and your family. Do you have a laundry room that smells musty or plagued with odors from the off-gassing of the cleaning products you store there? Keep your laundry room fresh and clean with the Pure Synergy, silently removing and oxidizing the VOCs, bacteria, fungus, and odors associated with them. Many times in an office setting, your cubicle is exposed to the germs of your coworkers. Cooking odors from the microwave or secondhand smoke can pollute your space, produce allergic reactions or headaches. Remove those allergens with the effective Pure Synergy MCI technology. The Pure Synergy: purify the air and surfaces, protect the living environment, and prevent spreading germs for people who like to breathe. For more information about this and other incredible high-tech but affordable equipment, contact the Clean Air Kiosk at 844-247-5467 or on the web at thecleanairkiosk.com.
Hi, everybody. This is Mike Balzano, publisher of R&R and The Experience Events. Welcome to Trade Talks, Unlocking the Experience. Today, this is episode 13, lucky 13. We have a guest today who's no stranger to the experience. He's been a leader at this event in our industry for a long time. He's a husband, he's a father, a leader, he's a marketer, a cleaning expert, a salesman, a spokesman, an avid photographer, a bear and wildlife aficionado. We'll talk about that in a little bit for sure. Okay. He is a proud Colorado Buffalo. He is a veteran of the experience. And he's the vice president of marketing of HydroMaster. Of course, it's Mr. Doyle Bloss. Welcome, Doyle.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that introduction. I looked at some of the previous people that you guys signed up for this series of podcasts, and it's fun because they're a lot of fun people. But I also feel honored just to be mentioned in the same sentence as some of these folks, because they've all given a lot for the industry and to help build a unique experience as it goes, a unique opportunity for the entire industry to come together at an event. And it's exciting to be a part of that, because there was a time when the industry couldn't get together nationally. It just wasn't possible. There were too many organizations in too many places. So we'll talk more about that later. Yes, I am a proud Colorado Buffalo.
Yes, indeed.
And for those of you who don't like Coach Prime, I just have this to tell you. I indoctrinated both my sons into the Colorado Buffaloes. Neither one of them ended up going to school there, but they both live and bleed the Colorado Buffaloes like I do. And they're both in their 20s, and they've never seen anything. We've been lousy their entire lives. So we're hopeful Coach Prime gets us where we want to go. So we're excited about that. And yeah, I am a Colorado native, went to school at the University of Colorado, and my heart's in Colorado. But if you haven't looked there lately, the prices are in Colorado are about equal to the West Coast. So it's not a cheap place to live anymore.
No, that's a lot. And actually, that first answer was wonderful, Doyle, because I was going to say, thank you for saying the nice things about this podcast. The real secret is, yeah, they're great people I've been having on, but this is my first time doing this, so I'm looking at my favorite personalities in the industry, so I could just sit here and smile and let you do all the work. And it's working so far.
Good.
So, yeah, we almost moved to Colorado. Actually, we're down in Naples, Florida now. About 10 years ago, we realized we didn't have to sit through the crappy Ohio winters anymore. And because the snow there is, you know it. You get a foot of snow in an hour, and then it's sunny for 3 days, and it's just beautiful. We have another event we run there. I go every year. I'm really flattered. I just love being there with the clear air.
Yeah, and people make fun. People keep asking me, why did you move to a little town in Kansas? And last week I was back in Everett at HydroMaster with our sales team and our production team, and we were having a bunch of meetings. And it took me about 10 minutes in the rental car on I-5 to remember why I like living in a small town in Kansas. So
Yeah.
the lack of we have one red light in our town, and it starts flashing yellow at 6 p.m. every night. So that's the kind of traffic I have to put up with.
That's nice. That's I'm very jealous, actually. That is nice, especially as we're not 25 anymore and we roll along. It's
Exactly.
calm us down.
Yeah,
Now as most people know, or for the two people who don't know, you've been in the industry forever, and actually your family has been in the industry forever. Tell me a little bit about how Ralph got started. Your dad and he's founded Steamway at age 60. Is that correct?
Well, he bought Steamway at age 60. He actually worked for the company for years before that. We lived in Illinois, and that's why I still root for the Cubbies. But
Yeah.
we moved from Illinois back to Colorado. We couldn't wait to get back to Colorado, and he went to work for a gentleman named Clark Seedloom, who had started. Clark was one of the original pioneers in the industry. And when I throw out some of these names, the people under 40 are going to roll their eyes and go, "Who's that?" But I have written a lot of history stuff about the industry, because I do think we owe a lot to those original pioneers in the industry that started companies. And I'll tell you a little story about that, because I actually started. My dad went to work for Steamway, so when I was a teenager, I got an old Steamway portable. Those of you who've been around a long time remember the old Steamway 400. Portable is kind of an oxymoron. They weighed 168 pounds. But I was 15 years old, and a friend of mine and I decided we were going to start cleaning carpets. And my mother drove us to our first jobs in a cherry red 1972 Ford station wagon.
Yep.
But we discovered real quick that there was a lot more money in cleaning carpets than there was in flipping burgers at McDonald's or whatever else teenagers did in those days. So we started a carpet cleaning business, and I've heard a lot of the great stories about how people originally got in the industry, but one of the ones that I like to tell is I've been cleaning carpets for about a year, and we got a job to clean my dentist's office, and it was a 3-story building. So my friend and I that were running a carpet cleaning business, we figured if we could clean the carpets in a 3-story building, we could probably retire after that. I mean, this job, the numbers were so big, and it's probably a $2,000 job, but we thought this was it. And so we started cleaning the carpet. Of course, it's in the middle of the night when they're closed, and about 2 hours after we started, we were so proud of the route, the how fast we were going and how clean, how good the carpet looked. But we looked back over the carpet, and there weren't ripples in the carpet. There were waves. And I'm talking about knee-high waves in the carpet. And back then, there wasn't ICRC schools. There certainly wasn't the internet. There wasn't people you could call to learn, what's happening and what should you do. The only person that I knew that I could call for help was my dad.
Mm-hmm.
And, my dad had a reputation of being this very kind soul. I have to tell you, he wasn't very kind that night, because I couldn't get him to quit laughing, because I really thought my life was over. I envisioned that I was going to be indebted to the owner of this building for the rest of my life, trying to buy them new carpet. And finally, in between my dad's chuckles, he finally spit out, "Let it dry, it'll go back down." And he was right. Of course it did, and it looked good, and nobody but my friend and I that were cleaning it ever even knew that happened. But for a while, I really did think my life was open. And I know a lot of my friends that were back in the industry in the 70s cleaning carpets can relate to that story, because there was just a lot of stuff going on then in terms of the backings and the types of carpet fibers and just a general lack of knowledge. You know, a lot of it was trial and error. That's kind of what you did sometimes, is you tried it and hoped that it went well. So we enjoyed that, but I ended up going off to college. I was going to be a CPA. That was my big goal, and so I went to the University of Colorado. But right when I graduated, my dad finally had the opportunity to buy Steamway from the original owner, and he was 60 years old at the time. So the bank asked him, you know how banks are, even to this day. They were polite about it, but they kind of said, you're getting up there in years, and you could kick off at any time. So could you get somebody to co-sign this loan? So he said, well, my son just recently graduated from the University of Colorado. He's going to be a CPA. And they said, okay, we'll take him. So I ended up co-signing the loan with my dad to buy the company. And I went back off to college because I was going to get a master's degree. And my dad would call me about every 2 weeks and say, son, I love you, and I'm glad you're out there having fun. At this time, I was going to degree. And he said, but I'm old and senile, and your name's on this loan too. I sure would appreciate it if you'd come back here and help me run this place. And by that time, my little brother had gotten involved, and my mom had gotten involved. So it had already become a family business. And so I thought about it, and I said, Dad, I really like it here. And he said, okay. So he would make that call about every month. And, I'm old and senile. And that's funny because he was 60 years old at the time, and he worked every day he was alive until he passed away at the age of 79 at Steamway. So it wasn't like he was on the edge of losing it. He enjoyed this industry in a way that I don't think a lot of people can understand back then. And the things that he loved about the industry, I tell people that's the things I love. There's no other industry that I know of. I'm sure there are, but I don't know about it, where a husband and wife can decide to start a cleaning business and basically pull themselves up by their bootstraps, not have a lot of money. And 5 years later, they're not only making a good living for themselves, they've got 2 or 3 employees that they're making a good living for. That's why I love this business. In spite of ourselves, we can be successful at it. And the 70s and 80s proved that, because there was nobody teaching anything back then. But early on, when I finally acquiesced and went to work for my dad. And, the first thing he did was sit me down at a class taught by Matt Clark, who was a business operator. And he taught business management, and the Stop franchise is eventually where he ended up. And I met people like Ron Toney and Jeff Bishop and so many of the early pioneers of education in our industry. And that's caught my attention. I mean, I loved working with those guys. And so from day one in the industry, I was really involved in the educational side. And that was a big part of what Steamway did back in the day. And so it wasn't just making equipment and talking to people about truck mounts. That's another thing that I enjoy about the industry, is that everything kind of stays in the same pattern. Back then, the big argument was about portables versus truck mounts. Do you really need a truck mounts? Now we talk about low moisture versus truck mounts. And obviously there's a place for everything. There is. But there's nothing like a fire-breathing truck mount. There's just nothing. And people who try and explain them away just don't understand the science of cleaning. So obviously I've spent my entire life involved in the supply side of the business. In 2003, after we had sold the business, when you buy this, Mike, when you buy a family business, it's very difficult to make your own way. And one of the things that I decided to do was, my brother had left for Hawaii to become a realtor. We don't even talk about him anymore. He's the black sheep of the family living in Hawaii. So seriously, he's doing great over there.
I'll bet.
Yeah. It's a tough life, but somebody's got to live there. But I just decided that it was after my father had passed away, and the new owner really needed to make his mark on the company, and I decided I was presented with an opportunity by the Hanks brothers to go out to work at what was known at the time as Hydroforce or Bridgepoint. Today we know it as a Ramsco. Or in Salt Lake City, and it was a big change. I mean, I've been in a family business for 20 years, and you know, I at the time I left Steamway, I was the president of the company, and I went to work for them out there, and absolutely loved what they were doing with that company. They were also involved deeply in education and training, and you know, the idea that they were building this network of distributors across the United States that could get supplies into the hands of cleaning and restoration professionals. You know, I still laugh when I read on some of the forums about people complaining, well, my nearest distributor is 3 hours away. And well, there was a time when your nearest distributor was like 5 states away. So
Yeah, move to Montana. Good luck with that. Go ahead.
Yeah, Montana's and yeah, we used to give a hard time to our distributor in Montana because he was selling so many truck mounts. We were convinced that he must be getting elk and bighorn sheep to go into the cleaning business. So then I spent about 10 years there and was presented with an opportunity to go to work with Hydromaster. And I'd always admired Hydromaster. You know, when I was working at Steamway, they were a direct competitor, but Mike Palmer and Steve Brandt and the guys who built Hydromaster were friends of mine. And I, you know, working at Bridgepoint, we were a big vendor. We were a big distributor for them, a big customer of theirs. So I went to work for Hydromasters and have been there ever since through a lot of different changes and ownerships and general managers. But one thing that's stayed true is the value of the cleaning equipment that the company manufactures, and it's been a fun ride. But like people ask me all the time, have you ever thought about leaving the industry? And sure, I mean, I've been presented with opportunities to leave the industry and go into training or public speaking and things like that. But I just love the fact that our business still represents such a great opportunity for people to grow a business and make something that is bigger than they ever imagined they could have. And that's, I think, one of the great joys about the Experience Convention is the ability of everyone to come together and celebrate what is a fantastic industry. So that's kind of like the quick history of what Doyle's been up to. And you know, I'm on the tail end. Barry Costa and I were standing at the Experience Convention a couple of years ago. And one of the things that I always loved that Larry did was recognizing people from the industry who passed away. And he kind of had an in memoriam thing with pictures and a little bit about their story. And obviously, you know, 100 words don't do the justice to the life of anyone, much less some of the pioneers in our industry. But I looked at Barry and I said, you know, the problem, these people on the in memoriam board now are not our mentors.
Yeah.
they're our peers. So that's, I think, when I first recognized, and you know, that's one of the things before I ever retire, I'm hopeful that younger leadership steps up. And I think some of them have. You know, Lisa Wagner may not consider herself to be younger than me, but she is, and she's a big part of what the Experience Convention does, and Mark Kennedy and some of those folks. And I think, you know, the leadership is evolving that will take this industry into the next century. And if you look at the amount of change that's happened just in my 40-year career, imagine what this industry is going to look like in 2060, 2070, and what it might be doing. And so it's exciting to see that. You mentioned photography. Yes. I do when I'm not working in the carpet cleaning business or in the restoration business, I do love to do wildlife photography. I try to go to Yellowstone or Grand Teton or Rocky Mountain National Park at least once a year. I love to photograph grizzly bears. I guess the best story I can tell about that was the first time that I was ever within range of the grizzly bear. It was about 75 yards away from us, and you're supposed to be 100 yards.
Right.
And but I had my 2 sons with me, and my youngest son, Josh, was about 6 or 7 at the time. And I looked at him, I said, so Josh, are you scared of this bear? And he said, no, Dad, I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you.
That's right.
So
That's right.
he quickly understood what we were doing, but to see wildlife in their natural habitat and photograph them, there's just nothing that I enjoy more. It's a grand opportunity, and obviously, it's changed a lot. You know, people ask me about it that are going to Yellowstone or going to Grand Teton. 30 years ago, to see a grizzly bear, it was a rare thing. You know, you were lucky enough to see one. Now it's fairly common. The grizzly bear population is growing. Any of our friends up in Montana can tell you that, because it's expanding into neighborhoods and places where they traditionally were but haven't been in 150 years. But it's just, you know, a bighorn sheep, elk, deer, if they've got antlers or horns, I like to take pictures of them. And so I spend as much time as I can doing that, and it's just for fun. My nephew is a professional photographer, and he went on several trips to Yellowstone with me. And my brother asked me to take him out there because I asked him, he knew what all this camera gear was. And we were standing in a fox den where there was a fox with 4 brand new kits that had just been born. And I asked him to add up the amount of money that was in the photography equipment. And he said about $700,000 is what he came up with, was standing there by us. And I said, just remember that photography is a great thing to go into, but it's a very competitive business. So he's actually ended up being a very successful photographer, but you know, he lives in Kauai, so he's got plenty of opportunities to take pictures of beautiful things. So that's what I like to do when I'm not doing things. I'm involved in church activities. I love to do that. My faith's a big part of my life and always has been. So I enjoy this industry and I enjoy the experience. So let's talk more about that.
Well, I want to go real quick because you said some great things. I want to ask you some quick questions about first. You know, it's the 13th one we've done. Everybody, we drift into why did you get into the 2 answers. Well, number 1, we want to help people, which is true. And what you said is that it's an easy way to start the American dream. You know, it's an easy way to start a business and get started. And I think both of those whys are wonderful and make you more excited to get involved in this, in my opinion. Because everybody has the same thoughts. You know, we're helping people out at their darkest hour, and we can start a business. And anyway, also,
when you're in business for yourself and a challenge comes up,
right?
Sometimes you honestly think I must be the only person this has ever happened to. You know,
right.
There are some bizarre things that happen, but you know what? Over the years, I've learned if it happened to you, it's probably happened to somebody else, and somebody out there, maybe through trial and error, maybe through the education they got, they figured out a way to fix it. And
as you mentioned before, I mean, we have some. I've been on my soapbox all year about getting our great leaders to mentor the next generation coming up, and I always have to explain that I have an AARP card too. I'm not saying go away. I'm saying you're the stars of this industry, begging you to help these kids find the way because they're excited to come in, and I think that's great. Do you think your dad saw something in you? I mean, I know he tried to kind of trick you into signing that loan, as dads do. But do you think he saw something with this way to get you? Because you know what? I'm happy he's gonna be an accountant, but I know he could be great at this. Or
I do. I think he thought I was way too dynamic of a person and liked people too much to be a CPA.
Right.
You know, if you think about it, you know, and obviously there's lots of wonderful people who are CPAs, but it's a desk job. It's behind the scenes. It's back in that corner counting numbers and doing things. And you know, I have a friend who went on to be a very successful partner at KPMG and has a wonderful wife and daughter and is super successful. But you know, he and I grew up together. We both went to school together to be CPAs. But yeah, I do. I think my dad thought, you know, he's a people person like I am, and he needs to be out with people. I don't have any doubt about it.
You and your dad were huge and are huge parts of the experience events. And by the way, it's a good time to mention the next event is coming up April 3rd to the 5th in Chattanooga. at the Chattanooga Convention Center. You
That's
can
right.
get
And everybody has to sing "Pardon Me, Roy" is at the Chattanooga Choo Choo.
Chattanooga Choo Choos are involved, and Sean Bission is already working on he's a train guy, as you know. He's working on some choo choo
Yes.
based fun.
And listen, let me tell you a couple things about
Yeah.
Chattanooga. Number one, the train itself, where they have the Chattanooga Choo Choo, is an awesome place. It's fun. And people don't understand Chattanooga is a great place to go. I've traveled the whole world, and I think the best aquarium I've ever been to is in Chattanooga, Tennessee. So if you love sea wildlife, they have just an awesome aquarium.
Perfect. What now? One of the things we know, our friends at Clean Facts event originally started the Ralph Loss Award, the humanitarian award. What was the origin of that? I mean, obviously it's because he was such a legend in the industry.
Well, I'll tell you, it was actually the brainchild of a gentleman named Evan Kessler, who was the publisher at the time of ICS magazine, which was a BNP meeting.
And R&R. So he was our original creator of this
He was
magazine.
the editor of it at the time.
Right.
And he's still very good friends with our family. And as a matter of fact, just recently announced he's retiring because of some health issues. And Evan was another pioneer in our industry, and his original boss, Howard Olansky. I've talked about both of them in my history blog that I have. But Evan went to my dad's funeral, and everybody that was from the industry knew about my dad's contributions inside the industry. But I think the thing that struck him is that there were 18 pastors at my dad's funeral. Head pastors of churches.
Wow.
And one of the things that my dad did in his life was pastor to pastors. And what I mean by that, if you think about it, if the preacher of your church or your synagogue or whatever faith you might be, if the bishop, or whoever it might be that is assigned to, tender to the flock, who tenders to them? Because they're just people. And that was one of the things that my dad loved to do, was to encourage and counsel pastors. And then the other thing that I think struck Evan at the time was all the different charitable events and things that my dad was involved in that he knew nothing about. He felt like, I thought I knew this guy. And the church camp that I went to when I was a kid in Colorado had just named a cabin, and because of all his contributions to that church camp. And what it really came down to is if my dad got involved anywhere, anything, he got involved, and he did something about it. And so that kind of birthed the idea that there was a lot of people in our industry that do humanitarian efforts. Some of them are well known. Some of them you've never heard of. Some of their humanitarian efforts are well known, and some you don't know anything about until somebody tells you about them. One of the definitions of humanitarian is somebody who does something without recognition. And there's literally thousands of people in our industry who mentor and serve their communities in a way that most of us never know about. I read about a carpet cleaner in the United Kingdom who 2 weeks ago went to a job site where he was cleaning for a 93-year-old woman that was dying of leukemia.
Mm-hmm.
And he just said at the end of the job, he couldn't possibly bring himself to charge that woman. And that's the kind of industry, right? People who care.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what birthed that award, is that it recognizes people. Sometimes you've heard of them, and sometimes you have no idea who they are. And last year's winner, Jorge, he's one of the best human beings you could ever meet. And I didn't know Jorge, so he won the award. A lot of my friends knew him, but I didn't know him. And after meeting him, I'm like, wow, this is one impressive individual. And that's what's been the funnest thing about the award, is the people who vote on it, the people who vote on the winners. It's not political. It's not out to recognize the biggest supplier, although some of the biggest people from the biggest suppliers have won. It's voted on by the past winners. Right. So it's like, and now we're up, 20 something winners. So it's always an impassioned thing. They take this the men and women on that committee take that award so seriously. You can't imagine how serious they are about it. And they take it and every year the vote is close because we always get 2 or 3 candidates that just stand out. And it's always very close. It's not like, that one person runs away with it. There's always 2 or 3 very, very worthy recipients. And there's literally 50 or 60 people that have been nominated over the years that have never won it. And their nomination gets voted, and they may never win it, but they're just superhuman beings. They're just the things they do for their community and the industry itself, but mainly their community on this award are just outstanding. So I really appreciate BNP Media and the experience, Larry and Clean Facts carried it on, and I'm very appreciative of it because there's plenty of awards that recognize people who achieve things in our industry inside the industry. But sometimes we need to step back and go, there is life outside of cleaning and restoration, and recognize people who are just doggone good people. That's what it comes down to.
Just again, doing these 12 little interviews, I've learned everybody's got such a great, you peel the onion back. They're good people. Like what you just explained, Lisa Lavender owned an Arena Football League team. Lisa Kennedy wanted to go to school to study Russian studies when the USSR crumbled. It's like all these interesting things. And I'd imagine not just the 12 people I talked to, it's an industry-wide phenomenon. The Ralph Bloss Humanitarian Award is such a big deal at our event every year. And I'm so glad that we're still doing it. And what was the first time you went to the experience?
Well, that's a great question, Mike. The truth is that if you go back in time, before the connections and then what became the Experience Convention, there were 13 different trade associations, regional trade associations around the country that held their own events. And I feel fortunate that when I was traveling young in my career, I did get to go to a lot of those events because I've met people at MSPCA and NEIRC and SCRT and CFI and CCI&W and PRCA, and I could go on with the alphabet soup, but the people that I met, just tremendous people. But the truth is that their events were local. And at the time, every manufacturer, there weren't a lot, the restoration industry wasn't nearly as developed then as it is now. Now if you have a restoration event, you've got consultants, you've got software, you've got all kinds of detection equipment, computer, you name it that has an interest in our industry. Back then it was people who made air movers and dehumidifiers and people who made truck mounts and portables and chemicals. And that's really all there was. And so you'd go to these regional events and, there might be 150 people there. I always tell my favorite story is my dad went to a trade show in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Now, if I'm going to plan a trade show, Tulsa, Oklahoma is destination that I would think of. But actually, I'm kidding it. But I love Tulsa. I live near Tulsa.
Right, I understood.
Yeah, I don't want to insult all my friends in Tulsa, but I think they would admit that nobody goes to Tulsa on vacation. But there were 54 exhibitors, and the attendance was 27. 27 people came to the show. But my dad, the ever optimistic, I said, so how do you? Oh, it's great. It's fantastic. We've made lots of good connections. That was my father. There was never an event where we didn't meet somebody who was going to be an integral part of the future of our company. And that was his optimism. That was always the way he looked at it. But as you can tell, those events were expensive for the vendors. They weren't well attended. Generally, you were talking to people who, you and I talked about this, Mike. Who do I want to meet at a trade show? I want to see all my friends. I want to see all my customers. But to make it financially beneficial, I need to meet some people I've never met before who are newer to the industry and they haven't been in it 25 years and they've been using this brand of truck mount since the beginning and they're happy with it. I need to meet some new people. And so all you met were the same friends. But the bigger part of it was that because there were so many small regional events, there was never an opportunity for the industry to get together as one group. And so all the trade associations came together and Larry Cooper birthed the idea of, at the time it was called Connections. And it started, I remember going, I've been to every single experience event except one since its inception. And it started out, it wasn't a great success at the beginning, but it wasn't a flop either. It went really well because the industry was clamoring for a national event. And obviously, over the years, it became immediately obvious that in spite of what some of us think of Las Vegas, that is the place to go. That's where people go.
You'll,
But
I feel exactly the same way, by the way. Go ahead.
I like to tell the story. The first time my wife went there with me, driving out of town, and she kept turning around as we were driving away from Las Vegas. And I said, honey, what are you doing? She says, I'm looking for the pillar of salt shaped as Las Vegas. Now, some of you will get that joke, and some of you have no idea what that means. But anyway, that's Las Vegas. But it's obviously a destination. There's so much to do there. But also that there have been many other successful East Coast events. You know, you and I were talking about Clearwater Beach and what a great place that was. And that outgrew the facility that the event was in. You know, I think everybody gets, why'd they ever move it from there? Because it couldn't hold it anymore.
We got too big.
It got big. So the first events were fairly successful, but as you know, this industry is full of organizations, and I don't mean this to sound bad. It's not. They have an agenda that has to do with them, and so there were some groups that never did join the experience. Some trade associations, some franchises, obviously, that never joined the experience, but it became the go-to national event, and it really did. And I know that, you know, every year, and especially Mike, now that you're the person running the show, you're going to hear from people who are disappointed in this and disappointed in that. And what, you know, it's nothing but, you know, you'll hear complaints. But let me tell you, if you haven't been around a while, you don't have the ability to learn from history. And the industry needs a single go-to national event that everyone is welcome. Doesn't mean that they need to stop their event, but there's certainly nothing wrong with coming to this event. Mm-hmm. And it needs that. And as over the last few years, as you know, that the restoration industry has taken on a life of its own, and there's a lot of events because of the importance of restoration, first response, and things like that. As some of these bigger hurricanes hit, and literally people lost their lives in their homes and all that. You know, the government got involved in everything else. But I encourage people. The experience event is the industry event. It's the go-to industry event where everyone is welcome. Anybody can attend. Anybody can exhibit. Unfortunately, Mike, you even let my competitors in. I don't know why, but you do. And it's a place that you can be at. And, you know, the truth is some of the manufacturers have backed away from the trade. And you and I know why. It's very expensive. It's very expensive to put on a trade show. If people had any idea how much you had to pay for that room a day.
Yeah. No, for sure.
Yeah.